Hello, everybody. Great to be here. So first, introductions. I am Chantal Schweizer. I'm the Practice Director of Strategic Data Services at Pivotree. I've been working in the product data space for about 20 years now. The first 10 years, I was at Grainger working with product data from a distributor point of view, and then went to Schneider Electric where I was working with data from the manufacturer's point of view, and then came over to the consultant side. I've been working with taxonomies. I myself am a taxonomist. I got an award like a year or two for being the best taxonomist in the world. Yeah. Crown sash. It's the one award that we do have, so really proud to be able to say I have that. And I've been helping companies organize their data for about a decade now, and I absolutely love it. It's really fun. And one of my favorite clients is TIMKEN, and this is Brett. Introduce yourself.
Yeah, hello, everybody. I'm Brett Laubacher. I'm a program manager at TIMKEN, really a technical program manager who usually did engineering-based projects or new product launches. So I got thrown into the IT world in the deep end about 10 months ago, learning about taxonomies, schemas, API calls, you name it. So we'll talk about what we've learned and what we've done at TIMKEN today.
Heck yeah. And I was hooked on data. He knows how awesome data is and how much fun it is. And we're going to keep him around for that. All right, so I'm going to start off a little bit about what is good data. And I'm going to play off a little bit of what Simon was saying earlier about data being the new oil, and I'm going to play with that analogy. And one way I think about it is that data in a PIM system is a lot like your oil in a motor engine. You want it to be clean and you want to be filled in order for your engine to work efficiently, and that's a lot how it works with a PIM system too. You need that data organized, you need it to be very, very complete, so you want to try to have as much data fill as you can, and having category-specific attributes organized in an attribution taxonomy as your backbone really helps get you toward that. And you want the data to be clean. You want to make sure that your formatting is consistent across all of your products, how you're using UOMs, capitalization, pluralization. All this stuff is really important to bring about a good user experience and just to make everything look pretty. And you want the data to be consistent. And that's really where, if you have all these downstream channels describing your products, you want it to be consistent across those downstream channels, and that attribution taxonomy really creates the foundation for that. It really helps you make sure everywhere you go that you're mirroring the same set of data, providing a very consistent user experience. And you also want it to be clear. You want your taxonomies, whether they be your attribution taxonomy, your e-commerce taxonomy, something in a catalog, to be very intuitive and simple and easy to read. So you want concise labels, and you want clean, clear, concise. All of the 4 C's are super important for your data all over the place. The little pyramid over here on the right goes into some of the best practices. And I'm not going to dive too far into those. If you guys want to learn more about those, jump on my LinkedIn, my YouTube. I talk about these endlessly. If you want to hear me talk about a lot of data, go there. It's a lot of fun. But just super important ideas. Just to highlight a couple. One is avoiding ambiguity. This is where you have a junk drawer in your taxonomy, like other or miscellaneous. It's really where products go to die. So no junk drawers. Try to stay away from those. And then another one I want to highlight is the no attribute stuffing. And attribute stuffing, this is pertinent to an e-commerce study or taxonomy more than anything. And that's where you're putting attributes into your taxonomy, like metal beakers and plastic beakers. Those things are better off as filters. So we want to try to keep it simple and bring it up just to beakers. And then to touch on some of the value of data, and Vinny did a great job diving into this in this last chat, like the value of data is super important, and trying to get that business case rolling so you can really invest in your data is super important. And that's what great PIMs like Syndigo really help you do this. It helps you organize your data and clean it up and be able to measure it so you can really invest in it and really use it as an asset, the asset that it is. And we see it, increasing revenue. We see it enhancing recall and precision of search on your on the websites. And a lot of people say, why is taxonomy so important on your e-commerce site when you're just going to search for it anyway? But the taxonomy informs your search, and the attributes can be indexed to inform your search too. So all of that really helps out. It helps reduce returns when you have all that complete data, all the data necessary for a customer to make a good, confident purchasing decision, and they know that this is going to fit exactly into what they're dealing with. And we can definitely see this with TIMKEN's data, because with bearings, I had no idea how complicated bearings were. I was like, oh, bearings, easy peasy. No. The amount of freaking dimensions in one bearing, holy cats, absolutely bananas. But all of this really helps there. So I want you to just continue to think about how important the product data is, how these systems like Syndigo really help organize this data, and how it really brings value to your company as an asset. And now to the fun part. Now we're going to talk to Brett about TIMKEN. So Brett, with TIMKEN, so you guys have a really unique data setup, a really unique way that your data flows. What can you tell us about that?
Well, I'll start with a little background information about the company so people understand better. TIMKEN is a 125-year-old engineering company, most famous for inventing the tapered roller bearing. But since then, we've acquired a whole lot of other types of bearings, and not just that, but other pieces of mechanical power transmission. So it's a big engineering company with a lot of complex products and a lot of different systems and legacy systems that have been combined with acquisitions over the years. Even just looking at our core bearing portfolio, the data for a tapered roller bearing, a cylindrical, a spherical, they're all very different. So that's been part of a challenge that's been ongoing, and one that we wanted to try and address with a PIM system. So one thing we did have, you talk about our data flow, is being an engineering company, we had to have lots of detail about our products because we're manufacturing them. So we had an ERP system with, we called it our engineering source of truth. We're storing all our dimensions and a lot of different details about all the parts that we make. Now, for context, we have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of parts. You can look at a bearing and say, change it by a millimeter, an inch, and the same thing has to be able to be in so many different forms and formats and sizes to meet all the different needs in the market. So SKU count is through the roof. So we have an ERP system with all sorts of detail in it, but it's not standardized, and there are gaps. And how do we turn this into a market-facing system was our challenge. So we wanted to keep our ERP system in place because that's where our engineers live, and we're not going to rip that out. But can we turn it into something that's easier to use in the digital space? So we pass our data through from our ERP system through a layer of data transformations that we call extract, transform, and load, into the PIM, where it becomes standardized and more usable in digital places, and then gets transformed on the way out to meet the needs of different use cases for the data.
Now, one of the things we saw with all these acquisitions is that with all these attributes, different acquisitions called different dimensional attributes, different things. So the connecting the dots between these different versions of the attributes has definitely been an interesting one. And it's we're getting there. We got almost all the dots connected, so very good news there. All right, so on to an attribution taxonomy. So how do you think that putting together this attribution taxonomy that we've been working on for the last year and a half, how much of an impact do you think it has had on the data and standardizing your data?
Yeah, so to talk about the taxonomy, when we first started, we went with our taxonomy that we knew from the engineering and manufacturing side. And it was very detailed and it was very multi-level, but it didn't really make sense for how customers saw our products. We knew a lot more about them than someone needed to buy our product and solve their problem. So we had to come up with a new taxonomy, a more simplified one to represent our products in the PIM. And the attributes that went along with that were an important part of the process too, because we had to determine which information was important enough to capture and which was likely to be needed in digital use cases. So that was really a big effort involving both the engineering teams and product management to have workshops and just nail it down and what we needed to do. And we were doing a phased approach, so we started with a certain level of detail, and now we're on our way to expanding. 150 attributes per product type is what we're going to have. Like Chantal said, there are so many dimensions to capture. But the attribution and the taxonomy is important because it makes you think about your product as a customer instead of just someone who is producing it.
Very, very true. And I see a lot of companies really fall into that hole where they're not thinking about the way their customer shops. They're thinking about how they are used to maintaining the data, and they don't want to separate from that. It's really hard to get people to kind of change their mindset into this attribution taxonomy that's supposed to be very simple to organize your attributes. You don't need it to be overly granular because a lot of these granular terminal nodes will have the same set of attributes. So you don't want to be managing the same schema in 10 different locations if you don't have to. You want to simplify that taxonomy so you're only managing it in the one spot. And we've had a great journey with TIMKEN in getting to that point with this taxonomy. We had like 3 different versions of it in the beginning that we were playing with, and then we decided finally on one that really works great and is really helping to organize the attributes much more efficiently. And with those attributes, one of the big things that we have and we've been building with TIMKEN is business rules. And we use a lot of those business rules to ensure data quality, to make sure that data is being transformed correctly. What can you tell us about some of these business rules?
Business rules, the way I think about those is if anyone's ever worked with a lot of engineers, when you ask them any question, the answer is, it depends. So how do you handle the it depends for these complicated products with all the variations? And that's the business rules, because anytime there is an attribute that is sometimes populated, well, what is the sometimes? What governs the sometimes? And you have to first grapple with your own definitions as a company, which can be challenging. Then you have to code them and set them up in the system, and then you have to test them. So we've gone through this. We have dozens of business rules, and some of them are quite long and complicated. But you have to vet it out and say, hey, are these, you show the product experts, here's some examples. Are these following our business rules? And it has to be proven out. So that is how you enforce the data quality. You have to make sure that anything that comes into your PIM is following these rules that all the experts in your organization have agreed on is how it should be. So business rules is always a big part of our new releases, our new schemas, and setting up new product types in the PIM.
Yeah, and they definitely do a great job, but I'll tell you, setting those suckers up, they're complicated. They're even more complicated than the dimension data. It's bananas. But they do what they need to do, which is awesome, and it really helps make sure that data really flows through the right way. All right, so next we go into the ROI of data. How do you think the data and the way that we've set things up is driving value?
Yeah, definitely as resources get tight, ROI is always going to be top of mind. And as a program manager, I have to help highlight that and justify why we're doing what we're doing. That being said, if you don't have strategic alignment, it's going to be hard no matter what, and we do have that. We have people very high level in the organization who view having your data usable in digital spaces as kind of the price of admission in the marketplace these days. So we are willing to invest in it and see inherent value in being able to use your data. And we have our own e-store, so being able to use it there, being able to use it in customer-facing websites and applications is inherently valuable. So we're mostly looking at it at strategic level, but we know that it's going to be able to be tied to individual purchases or customer views or exposure or all that comes with the analytics that go with the different websites and tools. So we're getting closer and closer to seeing that come to fruition now. And the first part, it was quite long, but just building up a database of solid data is step one, and we had to do that.
Very nice. Yeah, getting all that data down to those different locations, to your distributors, to your e-commerce site, all of that is definitely a big push. All right, and then everyone's most fun question. We've been doing this for a year and a half. We've gone through quite a journey over this year and a half. What lessons have you learned from this, or is there anything that you would do differently? Is there, what are the biggest things that you have learned over the course of last year? Yeah,
I think, first of all, we started out with the taxonomy, and we actually had a different company than Pivotree, and it kind of was a failure, a false start. We were building the taxonomy with a manufacturing mindset, and we ended up not pulling in enough attributes and not pulling them in the right way, and we went down the wrong path for quite a while before having to kind of scrap it and restart. So that's a lesson learned. We wouldn't have done that. Finding the right partner the first time is a good thing. Pivotree has turned out to be the right partner to help us, and Chantal in particular has helped us with the taxonomy and the right mindset there. Having the industry best practices to lean on, and I mean, because we're not experts in this as a company. We solve engineering problems. On the James Webb Telescope, Timken bearings, but website-wise, a whole different ballgame. So yeah, just starting with the right partner and thinking about it with your use cases in mind, I think is important for success. It's going to be a long road, especially when you have as much data as we do. I'm not sure our final SKU count as a company, but it might be over 1 million. So we have a long way to go still, but just narrowing it down to what you want to work on first based on the highest impact. I mean, there's certain customers who will use this data most likely, so which are those parts and which do we focus on first? I think the step-based approach with frequent releases has been working well for us. Frequent, relatively. I mean, we're not 2-week agile here, but a once every 6-month release is good. So it's been a lot of lessons for me just learning the IT space and the taxonomy and schema space in general. But overall, we're pretty happy with how it's been going and where it is now and where we're planning to go over the next year.
Very nice. All right, very good. So now we want to open up to questions. Do any of you have any questions, for me about taxonomy, or any questions about to Brett about his journey through their digital transformation, their digital journey here, about their data? Any questions out there? And I can't see you guys, so you might have to holler. These lights are like blinding. So if you have a question, be like, hey, Chantal, feel free. All right.
I'm sorry, I'm interested in the award. How did that?
No.
How did that work?
Yeah, so it's through KM World. They have an annual conference called Taxonomy Bootcamp, and you get nominated. So someone I had previously worked with had nominated me for it, and the reason I had won is I had a series of videos called The Product Taxonomist, where myself and my son Charlie would talk about taxonomy best practices, and it was a ton of fun. He's my little taxonomist. Like, I could hire the guy tomorrow if I needed to. So it was so much fun to put those together, and it was really educational. A lot of people were using those videos to educate their own teams about the taxonomy best practices, and they were tons of fun. They were fun to put together, and that's what got me the award. So that was pretty cool. Yeah. Yes.
Brett, now that you have the data in the PIM system the way that you want it with the right taxonomy, where are you focusing on your next steps for your downstream systems to consume data? Are you focusing on e-commerce? I know you have lots of engineering tools too, so what's your focus moving forward?
Yep. First and foremost is passing data to distributors that are our big partners for selling to the industrial aftermarket. And next is our own e-commerce site, which we have all around the world, different versions of it, but they can all use the centralized data. And then our own website, using engineering that have engineering tools where someone can design a system or choose a bearing to fit their needs, being fed by our PIM to make it standardized, make it more controlled and up to date. So that's pretty much our near-term goals.
There it is. Yes.
Can you give me a real life example from TIMKEN what you guys were describing before, that you should avoid taxonomy stuffing, right? Avoiding just getting all the attributions under all the taxonomy hierarchy. Was there some specific examples you could give that was like classic thing not to do?
Yeah, and with the attribution taxonomy with Timken, we did have to bend our rules a little bit. We wouldn't want this on possibly on the e-commerce site, but internally, there's a lot of attributes that derive specific attributes, like one of them being if it's a 1-roll, 2-roll, or 4-roll bearing. And so we did end up having a little bit of attribute stuffing inside of our taxonomy to account for those that differential in attribution for those products. So so a 1-roller bearing is going to have data to describe just that one set of rollers, where a 2-roller bearing is going to have dimensional data for 2 rows of rollers, and then of course for 4. So we did break our rules a little bit, but it made a lot of sense because it is driven by the attribution. When it comes down to it, you want to make sure sure that your categories on that back-end taxonomy are completely driven by your attributes, by your category-specific attributes, and grouping them in the most logical sense. And then with this, we were also able to use the business rules to also drive a little bit more, so we didn't have to overuse the attribute stuffing there to create that taxonomy. Like we have a rule about has cage, yes or no. And if that is a yes, then it turns on a bunch of other attributes. And we have several instances where we have that to try to keep the taxonomy simple. And I think we did a really great job at keeping the taxonomy super simple.
Yeah, we have a lot of complexity in various ways, like coatings, for instance. So you could say, I have a coated tapered roller bearing and I have a regular one, but that's really not where you want to do it. You want to have all tapered roller bearings and have a coating be at the very bottom of the taxonomy, if you know. So there were a lot of things like that where the way engineers would talk about it would be all these different silos, and we have to boil it down into how are these products most alike and try and consolidate it.
All right. Any other questions? Yes.
So with so many SKUs and all these variables that you said, full roller and coated, how are you handling validation that you're capturing the data correct on so many variables? Are you just have an overcomplicated business rule set, or how do you manage that?
Well, because it's in our ERP system, and that was pretty much in order from how we wanted it. We still had to expand that and introduce more attributes and for various product groups. But we have this flow going through into the PIM, and we have data quality reports set up along the way. So we can see our data quality and give that to operational teams to assign them to fix the errors. So it's really, in addition to just digitizing, it's a massive master data cleanup project, which probably every company can say, oh, our data stinks or our data could be better, but how do you get the focus and the resources to actually do it? And tying it into a project where you're enhancing your ability to sell by turning it into digital spaces is a great way to do that. Because just by itself saying, hey, I want to clean up my master data, as a former supply chain guy, I know that never worked. We would always just complain about it and continue to suffer. So we have been able to get significant people working and cleaning up issues that could have been known for a long time. We just didn't have the people to do it. But setting the standards in PIM, saying this data has to be in this format to this level of precision, it helps highlight where your data has problems and helps you focus on bang for the buck on master data cleanup.
So, sorry, what generated that quality report? Is that out of PIM or out of?
I think we have both. There are reports in Syndigo that we use that are standard, but we also have various ones along the way that we've generated.
All right, we might have time for one more. Yes, please.
You mentioned that you had to figure out which attributes were kind of the most important, and a little bit about shifting your mindset to being selling to a consumer versus what's the engineering requirement for things. Can you guys just elaborate on that process a little bit more? What did that entail for you to identify which attributes were the most important to include?
Yeah, sure. We started with, there's an organization called the Bearing Sellers Association, and they have a standardized template. So there's your attributes. I mean, it's a starting point, but it's thinking about what does a distributor need versus what does an engineering tool need, because that's where you get all the different complexity around dimensions and whatnot. But nobody's going to look at a website and say, I need to know the curvature here and all of that. So really it's looking at use cases, but in our case, we did have some guidelines.
And some of the things I've seen out there in the field with this is a lot of times the engineers and the people who are originating the data tend to be organized more from a BU unit or maybe by brand or by product line. So a lot of them don't want to shift from changing their data from a product line setup to a category of like what we call isness. So like literally, what is this thing? This is a tapered roller bearing. This is a spherical roller bearing. You don't want to have things that are like this is a spherical roller bearing for this product line, and this is the spherical roller bearing for this product line. And I see a lot of companies come into it with that mindset of having like this taxonomy that they've been using for decades organized by the business rather than organized by what the actual categories are, what the things actually physically are, because that's how you're going to describe the products, by what they are. And across, like if you have a roller bearing across like 5 different product lines, you want to have the same attributes describing all of them, so you can do a proper shop and compare of those different products. And so that's usually the thing that I see people struggle with the most, is changing from that, this is how we're internally organized, into the isness categorization mindset.